From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Radi Francis. Only on WION, World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is One.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Skoda, superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Are India and China disengaging at the border? The Chinese Defense Ministry made a sudden announcement today. It said frontline troops from both sides have begun a quote-unquote organized and synchronized disengagement from the north and south banks of the Pangong Lake. For a journalist, it's too tempting a headline to not lead with. But we know China better. We also know that the Indian side has made no official statement, and until there is an official Indian confirmation, we take the claim with a pinch of salt. China has made such proclamations before, so we've decided to wait till the Defence Minister of India speaks. He's expected to address the Parliament tomorrow. Until then, our focus remains on a neighbour, a very important one for India. Myanmar is witnessing mass protests and a brutal crackdown 10 days after the coup. There's gunfire, there's global condemnation, but China still continues to call the coup a reshuffle. On Gravitas tonight, we bring you 5 videos that tell the story of Myanmar. We also discuss why the world's threat of sanctions may not help very much. We need a new template, a new approach to deal with the situation. We'll talk about it. Also on the show, after towing China's line on the Wuhan virus, the World Health Organization has taken up cudgels against the US. Team Biden says they'll conduct their own probe. The WHO probe team says do not rely on American intelligence. Tesla hits regulatory roadblocks in America and China. What does it mean for the car company just before it drives into India? We'll bring you a special report. The necktie is a colonial noose, says a New Zealand MP. He's won the war on the tie in his parliament, but most of the world still remains a slave to the tie. And the race to Mars is heating up. The UAE's Hope mission has entered the orbit. China and the US should follow soon. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The Chinese Defense Ministry has claimed that frontline troops of India and China have started disengagement at Pangong Lake, where the two sides have been locked in a tense standoff. Indian government sources have said things have moved in the positive direction on the ground, and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is likely to make a statement on the issue in Parliament. British health authorities have announced that they have found 2 new variants of the coronavirus. Public Health England has identified 76 cases of the new variants. The United Kingdom has introduced new travel restrictions. Travellers coming from 33 countries, including South Africa, and all South American nations are banned from entering the UK. The US Senate has voted that Trump's impeachment trial is constitutional despite calls from Trump's lawyers to dismiss proceedings. The Democrats have been given 16 hours over the next 2 days to make their case to convict the former president. The governor of Sudan's South Darfur has declared a state of emergency in the regional capital of Nyala, where violent clashes have taken place between the police and protesters. The announcement came as hundreds of protesters gathered in the city to rally against the cost of living. South Africa has dropped plans to use the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine because of concerns that it may be less effective against mild and moderate cases of the variant in the country. The country will now administer the unapproved Johnson & Johnson's vaccine to its frontline health workers beginning next week. Meanwhile, a new study by Oxford University suggests that a commonly used asthma treatment, budesonide, appears to reduce the need for hospitalization of COVID-19 patients.
North Delhi, India.
Pope Francis expressed his condolences to the victims of the glacier burst in the Indian state of Uttarakhand. The Pope said he is praying for the workers who died, for their families, and for all those who were harmed and affected. The death toll from the tragedy has now risen to 32, while search and rescue operations continue for those missing. Israeli police deployed water cannons to disperse crowds of Orthodox Jews protesting the coronavirus restrictions. In recent weeks, ultra-Orthodox Jews have defied the curbs by holding big funerals for beloved rabbis who died of COVID-19, celebrating large weddings, and continuing to send their children to schools. Italy's former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has confirmed that his centre-right Forza Italia party will support Mario Draghi, who is getting together an unusual broad coalition to form a national unity government. Draghi was called in by the Italian president to form a new government after the previous centre-left coalition led by Giuseppe Conte collapsed. Women's world number 2 Simona Halep needed to rally from the brink of defeat to get past Ajla Tomljanovic in the second round of the Australian Open. Halep was 2-5 30-love down in the deciding set, but then reeled off 5 games in a row to snatch a 4-6, 6-4, 7-5 victory. 2019 US Open champion Bianca Andreescu crashed out with a straight sets defeat to Taiwanese giant killer Su Weisei, while 9th seed Petra Kvitova was upset in 3 sets by Romanian Sorana Kirstea. In men's action, world number 1 Novak Djokovic was made to toil for 3.5 hours in the afternoon sun before seeing off France's Tiafoe. World number 66 won the second set in a tiebreak and even rallied from a breakdown in the third, but Djokovic eventually prevailed 6-3, 6-7, 7-6, 6-3 to enter the third round. But 3-time Grand Slam champion Stan Wawrinka was ousted after squandering 3 match points in a marathon 5-setter against Hungarian Martin Fucsovics.
It happened on the 1st of February. The military moved swiftly to seize power in Myanmar. It was a bloodless coup. You would remember this. A fitness instructor was filming a dance routine while the coup unfolded behind her. 10 days later, the picture has changed. This is what Myanmar looks like now. Citizens on the streets protesting, military on the offensive, firing. The crackdown is lethal and extreme. Soldiers are using live ammunition on protesters. And in the face of gunfire, the people of Myanmar continue to fight for democracy. Tonight on Gravitas, we have for you 5 videos from Myanmar that describe how the military is conducting a brutal crackdown and violating human rights. This is a people's rebellion that the generals have failed to crush so far. Video number 1 came 3 days ago. These pictures are from outside a high school in Mayawadi. A protest against the military. These people were demanding the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. But policemen in uniform pulled out their rifles. They fired in the air and arrested protesters as they tried to leave. That's how Myanmar's military is trying to seize power, with armed policemen shooting at protesters. Video number 2, this happened in Mandalay, Myanmar's second largest city. The security forces descended on peaceful protesters. They were armed, and the moment they arrived, they fired in the air. Let me repeat this. This protest was peaceful until the firing from the police began. An eyewitness captured what happened. Video number 3. This happened on Tuesday, February the 9th. Things took a turn for the worse. What I'm about to show you may be disturbing for some viewers. This video is from Naypyidaw, the capital of Myanmar. A woman was out on the streets protesting against the coup. Wearing a red shirt and a helmet, suddenly a gunshot was fired and the woman collapses to the ground. This protester was shot in the head. She's now fighting for her life. Reports say she's critical and brain dead, shot in the head. Tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets. They're putting their lives on the line for their country. Meanwhile, the generals are still rounding up democratically elected leaders. This is video number 4 from Yangon. This happened today. These are the officers of the National League for Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi's party. Myanmar security forces conducted a raid here last night. Why? Over charges of voter fraud in the last election. It's a claim that the military is yet to prove with evidence. Locks and doors have been broken. Electronic equipment has been damaged. Cables in the server room have been cut. According to a report, a machine is also missing from this office. Hundreds of elected leaders were detained after the coup. This includes Aung San Suu Kyi. She's not been seen in the last 10 days. Despite the military's tightening control over Myanmar, a rebellion is brewing. It's not just citizens who are on the streets. Members of security forces have joined the civil disobedience campaign. Today, more than 20 police officers were seen on the streets protesting. This is video number 5 from Naypyidaw. Thousands of civil servants from various ministries joined the protest. They were seen holding banners in support of Aung San Suu Kyi. Some police officers have openly defied their superiors on the streets. Look at this. This was on Monday when the police force deployed water cannons against the protesters. 3 police officers left their positions. They joined the protesters to shield them from the water cannon. The coup in Myanmar was bloodless, but the aftermath is not. These people have tasted democracy and they're not ready to let go of it, even when faced with guns. So we have soldiers out on the streets with guns, elected lawmakers locked up inside their homes, and generals making promises they're not known to keep. What's happening in Myanmar is a textbook military coup. The protesting citizens are thinking out of the box now. They have found new and creative ways to amplify their voice against the generals. Our next report takes you inside Myanmar's protest for democracy.
They are young and defiant. 10 days after the military seized power, the youth of Myanmar is standing up to the generals. And they know how to catch the world's attention. This bodybuilders club took to the streets shirtless. Women wearing flamboyant gowns and wedding dresses have hit the streets too. Another group brought out inflatable water pools to the protest. All these protesters have one demand: a complete restoration of democracy. And the immediate release of Aung San Suu Kyi.
This is the very first protest our generation has faced. We are inspired by youths from other countries. We are young and untamable, but we don't want anyone to be in danger. So our Generation Z is smart and we will protest cleverly. Everyone is scared at the moment and we don't want to feel this way our whole lives. That's why we are protesting peacefully in spite of our fear.
The three-finger salute has become a symbol of these protests. It was first seen in the movie The Hunger Games. In 2014, protesters in Thailand used it after a coup. Now the campaigners in Myanmar have adopted it. It began with the medical workers. They announced a strike soon after the coup and refused to work for the military regime. The medical staff appeared before the press with red ribbons on their uniforms and the three-finger salute. It was a call for civil disobedience.
I don't want my children to grow up under military reign. I want to be a good mother, a responsible citizen and a good doctor as well. I have already explained to the public that I am participating in this movement. They all support our movement.
They're just protesting peacefully by wearing this red ribbon. We don't need to speak out. We all know that wearing red ribbon is a sign of protesting against the military government, and we want only our elected government. This is our message.
The youth of Myanmar responded with memes and slogans like these. It's too bad, even the introverts are here. My ex cheated, better than the military. I don't need dictatorship, I need a relationship. The protesters are cracking jokes at the military's expense and winning fans and support from the global community. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now here's a question. Will the Myanmar military keep its promise and restore democracy after 1 year? A rhetorical question, some would say. Has the purpose of a coup ever been to safeguard democracy? It's an easy question too. Look at the military's record and Myanmar's history. The generals have not covered themselves in glory. They have seized power 3 times in the past. Myanmar got independence in 1948. It saw a coup in 1958, then in 1962, and then again in 1988. Each time the military broke its promise, it kept extending its rule and delaying an election. What did the world do? They imposed sanctions. Clearly, they serve as a poor deterrent. The fear of sanctions has hardly ever kept an army from toppling a government anywhere in the world, not just in Myanmar. The only people who are affected are the citizens of that country. They feel the pinch of a sliding economy. Myanmar has seen a lot of sanctions. The world is threatening more, They may not hurt the generals. The military is rolling in money there. From mining to manufacturing to trade, the generals of Myanmar control all of it. They run a secret conglomerate with several local and foreign businesses as partners. It's called the Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited. They understand business. They also understand governance. Up until now, 25% of the seats in Myanmar's parliament belong to the military. The generals control the ministries of Interior, Defence and Border. So imposing sanctions on this military will not bleed them into course correction. What it will achieve is this: sanctions will throw Myanmar deeper into China's embrace. Beijing already has a lot of sway over this country, over Myanmar. China will want to cement this influence. That's because Myanmar is strategically very important to China. Let me give you 3 reasons why. 1, it provides China access to the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean has major shipping lanes. They're critical for China's oil imports from West Asia. Reason number 2, the roads that link Myanmar and China help it circumvent the South China Sea and the Malacca Strait. Again, very important. 3, China is Myanmar's biggest trading partner and hosts major strategic projects. Beijing would want to keep this hold. So China is not going to pick a fight with the generals just for the sake of restoring democracy. Beijing had its way with the democratic government and it will have its way with the generals. Western sanctions will only strengthen its hold on Myanmar. And this is something other international players must keep in mind while taking action. Condemnation and sanctions alone will not help. Persuasion and talks and incentives might. Let me show you a headline. Myanmar's junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has written to the Prime Minister of Thailand, Prayut Chan-o-cha, asking him for help to support democracy. The letter apparently gave reasons why the election was not free and fair. It also emphasized that it was the military that set the country towards democratic transition in the first place. The generals are looking for allies and trying to justify the coup. It's a different matter that they're reaching out to a man who himself led a coup a few years back in Thailand. What do they say about birds of the same feather flocking together? Anyway, in the West, all of this has ruffled many feathers. The European Union is ready to impose sanctions. They want to target individuals and businesses affiliated with the Myanmar military. The European Union already has an arms embargo on Myanmar. It has frozen assets and banned visas of at least 14 officials. Then we have New Zealand. New Zealand has suspended all political and military ties with Myanmar. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said that she will ensure that her country's aid programs to Myanmar continue and that they do not benefit the Myanmar army. The question is, how will she ensure that? While it is important to not legitimize dictators or support a coup, it is a fact that such proclamations and measures like sanctions, visa bans, arms embargoes, freezing assets, cutting ties, they do not reverse a coup. And this is where the world can perhaps take a cue from India. Delhi has adopted a cautious, practical approach towards Myanmar. During a recent United Nations Security Council meeting, India reportedly emerged as a bridge between conflicting opinions. It advocated for restoration of democracy, but also pushed for a statement that was not condemnatory. The international community will have to find a way, a more practical solution to deal with this, to talk to the Myanmar army, persuade them to restore democracy. A big fight has erupted meanwhile between the United States of America and the World Health Organization. This is about the investigation into the origins of the Wuhan virus, a probe that proved to be an epic failure. The WHO virtually gave China a clean chit, and now it is fighting with the United States. Washington is questioning the findings of the probe, and Beijing is spinning the inconclusive report in its favor. A lot has happened since that press conference in Wuhan on Tuesday. The United States has refused to accept the WHO report on face value. It wants to independently verify the facts, use its own intelligence, and work with allies to evaluate the report. The US State Department took a shot at China. A reporter asked if China had been transparent with the WHO team. This is what the American spokesperson said in response.
Well, I think the jury's still out. I think clearly the Chinese, at least heretofore, had not offered the requisite transparency that we need, and that just as importantly, again, the international community needs, so that we can prevent these sorts of pandemics from ever happening again. We are going to base our conclusions on nothing other than the data, nothing other than the science, and based on that, we'll come to a conclusion.
A member of the WHO team saw that statement and chose to respond. Take a look at this tweet from Peter Daszak, a zoologist who was in Wuhan. He said, and I'm quoting, "Joe Biden has to look tough on China. Please don't rely too much on US intel. Increasingly disengaged under Trump and frankly wrong on many aspects." To be fair, he's not wrong. But the fact that a member of the WHO team has called American intelligence unreliable is also significant. It's a clear attempt to defend this investigation that has frankly found nothing new. Even after spending almost a month in Wuhan, they came up with virtually nothing. Here is another expert from the WHO team, Australian scientist Professor Dominic Dwyer. His statement gives some insight into what really happened in Wuhan. When the WHO team began its investigation, first Professor Dwyer says the virus came from China. In no uncertain words, he says the evidence of the pandemic starting elsewhere is limited and it is not good enough. Very important point. The second thing that Dwyer says is that there were clear differences of opinion between the WHO team and the Chinese side in some areas. In fact, there were some heated exchanges too. So what is it that the WHO team is hiding? What were these differences? And what happened to them? Clearly, there's more to this than meets the eye. Like most experts in the world, America wants to look at the data that the WHO team has gathered.
We're looking forward to receiving the report and the data from the WHO investigation. We haven't looked at the data specifically ourselves, so we'd like to do that. We've expressed our concerns regarding the need for full transparency and access from China and the WHO to all information regarding the earliest days of the pandemic, but we weren't involved directly in the implementation of this investigation, and again, we'll just look forward to reviewing the findings in detail.
The WHO team should welcome this scrutiny. Instead, it is fighting back. This bitter fight is benefiting only one party, and that's China. This probe report is inconclusive, but Beijing is treating the outcome as a triumph. Now, Chinese officials have gone into an overdrive. They are trashing all reports that suggest that the pandemic began in Wuhan. They're aggressively pushing conspiracy theories. China says the pandemic did not begin in Wuhan. It started, in fact, in the United States. Here's an interview from Zheng Guang. This is from China's Center for Disease Control. This official is practically building ground for a WHO investigation in America. Consider these statements, and I'm quoting, "The United States is the focus of traceability. American biology laboratories are all over the world. Why should America set up so many labs? The US should have the courage to be open and transparent. The US should bear the responsibility of proving itself to the world instead of being trapped in hegemonic thinking, covering things up while blaming others for the source of the virus." He said this much. And this is the mother of all spins. First, China tried to cover up the pandemic. When it was quizzed about the origins and the Wuhan lab, it deflected. And now it is calling America the source of the virus without any proof and demanding an investigation into American labs. I said this yesterday and I'll say this again today. The WHO probe has been reduced to a cruel joke on all of us. Talking of which, does it seem like Elon Musk is in the news every day? It's because he is. He's either pumping billions into Bitcoin or sending out cryptic tweets to shake the stock market. It's all part of Elon Musk's brand, that of a cool billionaire. He's used this brand to drive the growth of his auto company, which is called Tesla, the world's most valuable car company today. The Tesla brand is a frenzy. But what about the actual cars? They've been hit by a string of technical issues. Regulators in the US and China have pulled up company executives. Thousands of cars, tens of thousands of cars have been recalled. It's a huge challenge for this company, and it comes ahead of Tesla's biggest debut, its entry into the Indian market.
Every decade has an automotive favorite, a car that beat out its competitors. To capture public imagination. The 1940s was the decade of the Jeep. Rugged, all-terrain vehicles, a staple of the World War. In the 1960s, the Mustang arrived. All-American muscle, emblematic of a radical America. In the 21st century, few brands can claim such glory. One of them is Elon Musk's Tesla, a company that builds cars for the future. Tesla is buying up bitcoins. It's building cyber vehicles. All very cool. But remember, the Jeeps and Mustangs were superior machines. What mattered was performance. So where does Tesla rank on that indicator? Not so highly considering recent events. In January, US regulators asked Tesla to recall 158,000 cars. The reason? Faulty touchscreens. And for Teslas, that's a deadly blow. Because the cars are completely operated using this big central console. The autopilot, rear view camera, air conditioning, navigation, everything is on it. A failing central console would render Teslas undrivable. The recall wasn't limited to America. Earlier this month, Tesla called back more than 36,000 vehicles in China. The third recall since the last quarter of 2020. Tesla has admitted there's a problem. When the memory device on the central console is overwhelmed, the touchscreen acts up, in some cases even going blank. Tesla's troubles in China don't end here. It was recently summoned by Chinese regulators and transport authorities. Customers were complaining about acceleration irregularities, battery fires and software upgrade failures, all serious issues. Tesla has promised to investigate the problems and comply with Chinese regulatory norms. These red flags coincide with a key moment in Tesla's growth story, its debut in India. Before the pandemic hit, Indians were buying more than 4 million cars every year, making it one of the biggest auto markets in the world. And unlike in the West, it has massive untapped potential, the millions-strong middle class, eager to buy their first car. And with diesel being phased out, battery-powered cars will be much sought after. Enter Tesla. It's already registered in Bengaluru, and the flagship Model 3 is expected to roll out in June. But if the technical issues persist, the Indian consumers may not be as forgiving as their Western counterparts. The electric car industry is still finding its feet in India. A massive recall, similar to China and the US, may destroy consumer confidence. Tesla's India debut is a make-or-break moment for the company. It is here that global brands falter or catapult to immediate success. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now in India, protests over farm laws continue. There's a lot of noise that has taken control of the narrative. There's little discussion on the actual issues, the real provisions of the law and why they may be problematic for some. Now, some global celebrities have adopted the cause. The likes of Greta Thunberg, she has expressed solidarity with Indian farmers through a tweet. And then she came in for a lot of criticism from her supporters and critics alike. We spoke to one such person who has been endorsing Greta's climate activism, but has now written an open letter to her. The former chief operating officer of the UN Sustainable Energy Organization, Mohinder Gulati, he joined us from Melbourne earlier today, and he's offered a crash course to the likes of Greta Thunberg and others on farm laws, asking celebrities and people with a lot of influence to first educate themselves before commenting. I spoke to him earlier today, and I started by asking why he felt the need to write such a letter to Greta Thunberg. Listen to this.
There were two reasons why I felt compelled to write to her. One is the reason related to her, and second is the reason related to the discussions, debates, and in the media and otherwise on the ongoing farmer agitation. On the first one, as you know, I was the Chief Operating Officer of SE for All, and my organization was vested by the Secretary General with the responsibility to build consensus for sustainable development goals. And I had left by 2015, but then I saw Greta Thunberg and the way she went about it, the way she built a whole global momentum around this issue. I was so pleased that finally, we had built up this engagement and involvement of youth so much that it had become a global movement. And I wanted Greta to use her political and moral capital to build more consensus in the coming COPs to exhort global leaders into more rapid action, which is what she has done very well. So I thought if she gets into these kind of local political issues, which are far more complex, and there are a lot of wheels within wheels, and there are a lot of conflicting interests, lots of time vested interests, which will suck her into a political vortex and will erode her authority. So that is the reason why, that was one reason why I felt compelled to write to her. The second reason was that the debate on the farmer agitation, unfortunately, at least to the extent that I have noticed, was not very substantive. It was superficial, that the issues that were being debated were, there was lack of consultation. Okay, really? There was no non-democratic process in legislation. There were these expanded demands that were being made, which were not a part of the law, about MSP and others. And I felt that this was very superficial discussion. There was no substantive discussion on the contents of why do we need these agricultural reforms, what should be the contents of those agricultural reforms, what will be its impact, who will be the losers and gainers from this, and how do we protect the legitimate interests of those who will be hurt by this, and what is the transition path. And many of the people were commenting on these things without getting deeper into some of these issues.
Right. So there's freedom of expression and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But when celebrities wade into a controversy without a clear understanding of the issues at hand, they come in for a lot of criticism. Do you think the onus is on them more than others to ensure they know enough about a subject before speaking on it?
With the celebrity status and with the major influencer status comes a major responsibility. And therefore, all those whose voices get amplified, or a cause gets amplified because they have taken it up, they have a higher benchmark for responsibility. They should look at not only what the issues are, look at the complexity of those issues, understand that, and take a more nuanced approach. Because after all, these reforms are very necessary for development and for poverty reduction and for improving the rural livelihood and agricultural incomes. Also at the same time making the agriculture less resource intensive and less damaging to the environment. We need to do that. And therefore, one has to understand it is not just a question of human rights or democratic rights, because all those people, they say 90% farmers, as I have said in my letter, who are silent, who are actually going to benefit from it, they also have human rights. But I felt that in India, there are these enough robust democratic processes, institutional processes, which come into play. It may look chaotic from outside, and I have spent 25 years outside. So these may look chaotic, but actually under that chaos, there are very robust processes.
And yet there are people and influencers from all over the world who believe that they must weigh in and they must lend their support to one side or the other for justice to really happen. What then is your advice to the likes of Greta Thunberg?
Not only Greta, I have a lot of respect for her, I have a lot of admiration for her, and I want her to continue to focus on the climate issues, which is an existential issue for us. And I don't want her to erode her political and moral capital by becoming a divisive lightning rod when everybody gets together in the UN to talk about these things. And my suggestion, I mean, I'm nobody to advise, my suggestion also to the farmers and farmer leaders would be, look at the issues, not the interests. The average rural household income in India is 9,000 rupees a month. I mean, that is pitiful, 9,000 rupees a month. And if you look at the divide, the differential between the urban and the rural income in 2020, before pandemic I'm talking about, urban incomes were 12 times that of the rural income. And if this structure of the economy and these rates of growth and business as usual continues, this differential between urban and rural will grow to 18 times by 2030 and 24 times by 2040. Now that kind of inequality, income inequality, is not sustainable. It is politically not sustainable, economically and socially not sustainable, and it is not even desirable. Why is it so? Because if you look at the structure of the economy, about 85% of the GDP comes from manufacturing and services, which grow at 7 to 8%. 15% of the GDP comes from agriculture, which has been growing at 2.5%, 3%. That's the long-term growth. That would be wonderful for any modernizing economy. But the flip side of that is that 60% of the population of India lives in rural areas. Therefore, by proxy, dependent on agriculture one way or another. And 35% of the urban manufacturing and services are mostly in urban. 35% of the population benefits from 85% of the economy, which is growing at 7%, 8%. While 65% of the population depends on 15% of the GDP or economy, which is growing at 2.5%. So how can you overcome that growing inequality and differential? And therefore, in 2010-11, when we were doing this work, I had called this as a time bomb ticking. And I had been cautioning that this differential between agriculture and the rest, which is rural and urban, is a time bomb. And what will happen is that the political backlash of that will become so much that the government will have to redirect the budget to more and more for welfare rather than on investment. And that will then restrict or constrain the India's objective and aspirations of double-digit growth. So this is what is coming home to roost. So therefore, we do need to do something about increasing the agricultural income, diversifying their livelihood, not just only agriculture, diversifying the livelihood, diversifying the agriculture. And that cannot be done by government and government alone. If the very heavy presence of the government in directing as to what should be grown and purchasing it and then distributing it, governments do not do these things efficiently. Governments do it very inefficiently. We need to bring in the dynamism of the private sector, bring in the efficiency, bring in investment, but in a regulated manner so that the small and marginal farmers of India, which is a very, very large number, that they are not thrown at the mercy of an asymmetrical negotiation between them and the private sector. So therefore, we need appropriate laws, we need the regulation, we need the proper institutional mechanisms to protect, but we also have to bring in the dynamism of the private sector.
Indeed, and democracies will always have dissenters. Some question the government's motives, others question the government's approach. Do you believe, Mr. Gulati, that the government of India is moving in the right direction?
These laws are necessary but not sufficient. There's a lot more that needs to happen beyond these laws. So these laws are a step in the right direction. They are good. There can be a few issues there, which I have also, we have looked at those and we have pointed out. There are a few issues in those laws which can be rectified, but that is always the case with any reform. This is what I called as a learning by doing. This is not a static view. These reforms, these laws are good, they are necessary, they are not sufficient, and we should be open to keep on calibrating it as we implement and see how the markets and people are responding and reacting to it.
Indeed, and your points are very, very interesting, and we hope that they bring some semblance of logic back to this debate. It's very important to focus on facts and to focus on data before shaping your opinion.
May I say that in addition to logic, civility and mutual respect, that also needs to come, little flexibility, little open-mindedness, that needs to come into the dialogue. That is what a civilized democratic process is.
Couldn't agree more. Mohinder Gulati, thank you very much for being with us on Gravitas.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, there are some things that we are so used to that we forget to stop and ask, why are we doing it anyway? Habits can be hard to let go of, especially when you've been following them for decades, and that too at someone else's behest. We're talking about the necktie. It's become a constant in every formal ensemble. We are told that a tie completes your look. In New Zealand's parliament, this has become a controversy. The man on your screen is called Rawiri Waititi. He is a lawmaker from the indigenous Maori community in New Zealand. On Tuesday, he was asked to leave the parliament. Why? Because he wasn't wearing a tie. This controversy is not new. Last year, the same man was told that he would be ejected from parliament if he did not wear a tie, and he responded by calling it a colonial noose. Tuesday was a repeat of that episode. He rose in parliament to ask a question. He was stopped twice by the speaker, but after the second interruption, he carried on speaking, at which point the speaker rejected him. Out in the hallway, Waititi defended his attire. He repeated his assertion that the tie was a colonial noose.
As you can clearly see, this attire is business attire as far as I'm concerned, and as far as many New Zealanders and Aotearoa is concerned. This is a tie. This is a tie to my people. This is a tie to the plight. This is a tie to the very reasons why we stand in this place to fight for our rights. That is not part of my culture, ties, and it's forcing the indigenous peoples into wearing what I described as a colonial noose.
Waititi does not want to wear a tie because it is not part of his culture. Instead, he's wearing something that highlights his Maori roots. A green stone pendant called taonga. What's interesting is that the speaker himself is opposed to ties. He says they're outdated, but a majority of lawmakers apparently requested him to retain the tradition. Waititi's removal divided the Parliament of New Zealand. The Defence Minister said there are more important issues to discuss. In the end, better sense prevailed. This man was allowed to return without a tie. He called it a big day for the Maori. But there was something even more poignant in his speech, something that exposed the big picture. Take a look.
This government and this parliament sits on stolen land, but it has been established because my ancestors consented to the establishment of a government. And so this is a pushback to those who uphold this colonised view that we give our sovereignty to a sovereign that lives 12,000 miles away from New Zealand, lives in England actually.
This is a pushback to those who give our sovereignty to someone who lives 12,000 miles away in England. So he said, a tie is less about fashion, more about culture. The earliest reference to a necktie is from the 17th century. Croatian mercenaries in France used to wear them. It was supposed to indicate their alliance, but soon European nobility hijacked it. In French and British courts, it became a symbol of wealth and power. When the Europeans went about colonizing the world, they took the tie along. So this piece of garment around the neck separated the rulers from the subjects. Cut to present day, colonialism is long gone, but its vestiges remain. The world still considers the tie to be a part of civilized clothing. And this phenomenon is global. Think about the jobs where ties are mandatory, at least in some countries. Postal workers, firefighters, police officers. Why do these frontline workers need ties? They're always out on the streets toiling hard. A tie is nothing more than a nuisance, but they must wear them. The same at schools. It's become common for school uniforms to include a tie. Again, it's part of the so-called formal look. But is it even practical? Maybe in Victorian England it was, but not in cities where the sun is pelting down at 40 degrees. So the tie clearly is not practical. It also has the baggage of colonialism. So why does it continue to thrive? One reason is vested interests. Garment companies love selling ties, and they're not cheap. So they keep promoting the idea that ties complete a sophisticated look. The second reason is that most people are set in their ways. They do not change things because they're so used to them. Consider this. England, which exported the tie around the world, does not require its lawmakers to wear one anymore. That law was scrapped in 2017. So what happened in New Zealand is a wake-up call. There are colonial vestiges all around us. It's about spotting them and acting against them. And remember, a tie does not make you civilized or sophisticated. Your actions and your words do. Enough lecturing. It's the middle of the week, packed with a lot of important developments and stories, and we make the constant effort of getting you the news that matters, but sometimes things can get too serious. So tonight, we want to end the show with two headlines, two crazy stories that will make you wonder what just happened there. The first one is about Gorilla Glue. Trust me, I did not know such a thing existed. I'm told it's one of the most powerful adhesives in the world, apparently used to fix bathroom tiles and wooden flooring. But one wise woman in Louisiana decided to use it on her hair. Tessica Brown, the lady on your screen, she ran out of hairspray, so used this glue instead and ended up in a rather sticky situation.
Hey y'all, for those of y'all that know me know, my hair has been like this for about a month now. It's not by choice. No, it's not by choice. When I do my hair, I like to, finish it off with the little Got2b glue spray, just to keep it in place. Well, I didn't have any more Got2b glue spray, so I used this Gorilla Glue spray. Bad idea. Y'all, look, my hair, it don't move. You hear what I'm telling you? It don't move.
It just don't move, she says. Well, the video did. It went viral. 3.3 million views and counting. Netizens had a lot to say about this. One user said he's using Gorilla Glue on his next relationship. Good move. Another said she needed the glue to keep her life together. What about the poor Miss Brown? Last we checked, she'd raised $13,000 as charity in one day thanks to her hard rock hair. Let's bring you the second story. It's about a Zoom call mishap. A live stream of a virtual court proceeding in Texas. It took a rather awkward turn when a lawyer appeared as a cat on screen. The lawyer did not know how to remove it. All he could say was this: I'm here live and I'm not a cat.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
This is a court proceeding. The lesson here is simple. Check your filters on a Zoom call and in life. We're taking a break. Up ahead, Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.